I've had some questions about the equipment and tools that I use when making books, so I thought I'd do a quick video about some of my favorite gear. A lot of the stuff in this video you can buy on the cheap or even make yourself for next to nothing. But I'm going to start with probably my most expensive piece of equipment that I can't do without, and that's my guillotine. If you've ever cut bookboard by hand, and who hasn't, or tried to trim a text block with a straight edge and an X-Acto knife, then you'll understand how invaluable this one piece of equipment is. There are two primary differences between a guillotine like this and a regular paper cutter that you would see in a school or office setting. First, the guillotine has a separate clamp that holds the object in place. And secondly, the blade comes down parallel to the cutting surface rather than pivoting at an angle from a single point like a paper cutter. Both of these features allow you to make perfect cuts with almost no effort and without the object moving around. It also allows you to cut much thicker layers. I think cutting bookboard by hand is incredibly tedious, frustrating, and painful, and makes the cost of this guillotine worth every penny. I paid about $150 on Amazon for this particular cutter. It's a very heavy beast, so it's best to find a place for your cutter where you can use it without having to constantly pick it up to move it. I keep mine permanently on top of this nifty Ikea rolling flat file so I can roll it out when I need it and then roll it back to the wall when I'm not using it. It was pure serendipity that it happened to fit perfectly on top. And speaking of furniture, I might as well mention here a couple of pieces from Ikea that are very useful. I do have a couple of these rolling flat files, and I use them for books, book cloth, bookboard, paper, all kinds of things. I do have a bigger flat file that I've been dragging around with me for decades that I use for larger prints and paper. A big file this size can be pretty pricey, but the smaller Ikea files were a very affordable $130 each. I also have a pair of these tall, narrow drawers that I keep all kinds of small things in. These are also from Ikea and cost about $160. They come in white, black, and blue. I painted these myself, as well as the large flat file, to match the colors on my ceiling fan just for fun. Probably my favorite pieces of furniture from Ikea are also the cheapest, and these are my two work tables. You can get tops of different sizes and different kinds and colors of legs. They're very sturdy, and the fact that they're quite cheap keeps them from feeling too precious, so you aren't afraid to use them any way you want. The table plus the legs run about $45. If you really destroy the tabletop, you can replace just that part for about $30. Also, in the realm of studio furnishings, I also have lots of bulletin boards on all of my walls. I looked around for a long time trying to find what I wanted, but finally just decided to make my own. These are made with sound insulation board that I bought at Home Depot, which you can get for about $15 for a 4x8 foot sheet. I cut them into 3 pieces and then covered them with cheap canvas fabric. I used a staple gun to attach the fabric to the back and then hung them up on these simple L hooks. They've held up perfectly for many years through hundreds and hundreds of stabs with thumbtacks. So on to some of the smaller items. Another thing that I couldn't get along without is my cutting mat. I have several of these, small, medium, and large, and I use them constantly. They seem to magically last forever through hundreds and hundreds of cuts. This large one is 2 by 3 feet, and I bought it at Joann's years ago, so I don't know exactly what I paid for it. But they always have 50% off coupons, so if you wait for one of those, you could pick up one of these large mats for around $35. A good straight edge is mandatory. These are the 2 rulers that I use most often. It's good to have one that measures at least down to 1/16 of an inch, particularly if you're making boxes or slipcases where precision is important. My long straight edge is just a cheap metal yardstick from Home Depot, but it's durable and it also has measurements in centimeters and millimeters. Bone folders are useful things. You could get along without them, but they do make folding and scoring easier, and I always use them to press down paper or book cloth when I'm gluing it to bookboard. You can find these made from bone, plastic, nylon, Teflon, ivory, or bamboo for anywhere from $5 to $25. The cheap ones work just fine. Everyone has their own favorite cutting device. For a lot of people, that's an X-Acto blade, but for me, it's either a single-edged razor blade or a nice sharp scalpel. You can buy these scalpels with a lot of different handles. I like the big fat handles because they're more comfortable to use. I use an old wine cork to stick the blade into when I'm not using it. These run between $5 and $10 depending on whether you buy the plastic or metal handle. You can also buy a box of 100 replacement blades for around $25. I bought these handles and blades from a bookbinding company called Talus. I also like to use single-edged razor blades for a lot of tasks. I buy these boxes of 100 from Home Depot for about $6. Speaking of scalpels, I also have this really nifty medical kit that has all sorts of interesting and useful tools. It has several different scalpels, tweezers, scissors, forceps, several pokers, and some very useful flat tools that I have no idea what they're actually for. I have found all of these tools to be useful at one time or another. This is actually a student dissection kit and cost me the astonishingly cheap price of $15. You'll probably also want some sort of hole punch. They make simple hole punches that you'd use with a hammer, like this one. The tool I use most often for punching holes is this Crop-a-dile. It has 2 different size punches and tools for setting many different kinds of grommets or eyelets. It really does all of these things quite well and is worth the somewhat pricey cost of around $30. I also found myself occasionally needing to punch holes in the center of bookboard, so I also have this big Bite Crop-a-dile, which has a good 6-inch reach. Also pricey at $45, but it makes it really simple to punch holes and place grommets much deeper on a project. Again, look for a Joann's 50% off coupon and save some money on these punches. You'll want a variety of weights. I have a combination of both hard and soft weights that I use depending on what I'm doing. These small brass weights are not cheap, around $35 for just one of these, but they're well made and very high quality. I got these at Tallis. I've had that heavy lead weight forever and found it in my grandmother's basement. These soft weights are actually diving weights and the weights I use most often. These cost anywhere from $9 to $20 depending on the weight. You could easily make your own soft weights with fabric and sand or lead shot pellets, and a brick wrapped in fabric makes a simple and useful hard weight. You'll also need something to punch holes in your signatures with and something to punch into. You could use an awl that you probably have lying around your house in a toolbox somewhere, or you can buy specialty punches from bookmaking supply companies. I like something thinner to punch holes with, so I generally use a needle. I push the eye of the needle into a wine cork so I have something more substantial to hold on to. I also often use this dense foam pad for punching my signatures. It gives me something to punch into, but is also stiff enough to provide some support. I just glued a couple of pieces of dense foam together to make this. You can purchase a punching cradle like this one if you prefer punching your signatures from the inside, although these are very expensive. You can also make a cradle out of bookboard or just use the inside of an old phone book, which will hold your signatures and allow you to punch into the open spine of the phone book. Pva glue is a necessity, and there are a lot of delivery methods. The most common methods are either a roller or a brush. I just recently bought these little glue syringes, and I'm not sure how I've lived without them up until now. They're easy to fill, and they have a very narrow, long nozzle for getting into small places. Perfect for applying glue to those pesky small areas of book cloth or bookboard that don't quite adhere correctly. The best part is that the cap has a long needle that fits into the nozzle to keep it from getting clogged with dry glue. These are pretty reasonably priced. I got a package of 3 for around $11, again from Tallis. Another item that I use all the time is this glass shelf that I bought at Ikea. You can buy a variety of sizes for a very affordable $5 to $15. I have a couple of these, and I use them for making book cloth or rolling out glue when I use a roller, or laying out ink when I'm making wood or lino cuts. They are thick and very durable. The best part is that since they're meant to be used as shelves, they have safe rounded edges so you never have to worry about getting cut. I have a couple of small tools that I've made. You can buy equivalent tools, but they're easy enough to make if you don't want to spend the money. I use these spacers all the time to get the correct margins between pieces of bookboard, particularly when I'm making a cased-in book. I have several of these of varying thicknesses. I just glue together pieces of bookboard until I get the thickness I want. You can also just cut a single piece of bookboard to the correct thickness, but I like that these stand upright and have sort of a handle for pulling them out of the space. I also made this corner miter template that makes it easy to cut your book cloth or paper with a perfect miter at the corners. This leaves a 1/4 inch allowance of material that gives you the perfect corner fold every time. You can find plastic or metal versions of this online if you don't want to make your own. Lastly, I just want to comment about using bookboard, which is also called binder's board or Davy board. This kind of board costs more than regular chipboard or cardboard that you can buy at craft stores, but it's worth the money. The quality is much better, it is always archival or pH neutral, so it won't rot your books, and it is made in layers. This last feature makes it easy for certain techniques, like hiding ribbon or other attachments, because you can peel off layers to create graves in which to place those parts of your book construction. You'll see this technique in some of my other videos. You can't do this very successfully with chipboard. So that's a look at some of my gear. I'm sure I've probably forgotten some things. If you have any questions about what I've shown, or maybe what I've missed, just ask in the comments below. I'll also post some links to the items I've mentioned, as well as the main suppliers that I use, in the description.